shaping the decisions which affect all of our lives. We do that in those multiple ways that I just described, through allowing people, when they just have 5-10 minutes at home or waiting at a bus stop, to sign a petition and express their opinion on something that's current, on a decision that's about to be taken. We do it in those ways by allowing people to send messages into the inboxes of decision makers or to get on the phone to get their attention. And we also do it by, and this is more rare because it's harder to organise, by the types of pickets and stunts which we accelerated in July in the lead up to the crucial decision on whether Rupert Murdoch would be allowed to take over B-Sky B, our largest commercial broadcaster. And that's just one example of a campaign where we think this fairly young organisation I'm going to describe today has had an impact. And I'm going to tell some stories about a few of the campaigns that we've run, trying to give you an understanding of some of the thinking that we bring to how we operate our website, how we choose what to send people on email, and how we get a response from our many, many members, the numbers growing to close to 10 million, to make sure that we are working with our members, and we're building up a movement, and we're not just operating as a bunch of staff and an email list. So, we are just shy of 5 years old as an organisation, as a movement, and I've only been working with Avaaz for just over a year. And I happen to live in Bristol. I work mostly from home, and it's a virtual organisation. That's one of the things that's unusual about it. There's a small office in New York, but the vast, vast majority of us just work from home, work from shared office spaces, a bit like this, or work from their bedroom. It just depends. So, about five and a half years ago, Rick and Patel, who's the founder of Avaaz, who's a wonderful, charismatic, visionary Canadian activist who'd spent a bunch of time in West Africa dealing with tough conflict situations, then moved to New York and did some work of advocacy around the United Nations to try and get decision makers there to take seriously some of the responsibilities in the UN Charter. He had a proposal, and this is the original business plan for Avaaz. He said, Avaaz.org proposes to build a multilingual online community of citizens across the world committed to civic engagement. It will give citizens in most countries their first opportunity to contact their elected officials easily and directly. It will offer members regular, simple, one-click opportunities to make a real difference and advance their agenda by funding high-impact initiatives, emailing, faxing or calling national or international officials, signing petitions, or supporting offline actions. And it says that it will operate at first in 8 languages and build out. It will borrow from the American Move On, the type of campaigns which were used by some of the presidential campaigns to really energize their grassroots and get a different funding base from the big corporates. And it will try and take this global. That's a pretty about it, the idea that a small number of people using these web-based tools can not just do something in one country, such as the United States, but can do it worldwide and fairly instantly. Now, the obstacles are, of course, technological. Broadband and other internet hasn't spread as far across the world as we'd like it to, and there are still pockets of this country where it's not ideal. But that's only the quarter of it, I would think. The bigger questions in the people's minds who set up Avaaz were whether taking a simple diagnosis of a problem, maybe you've got 100 words to diagnose the problem, taking a simple proposal of how to fix the problem and who can fix the problem, maybe 150 words, and taking an action that an individual concerned citizen can take, possibly another 100, 150 words, you can find a message which will resonate worldwide with just some simple translation, not a whole team of people localizing, working out the nuances in all of the different countries in the world. It's a very visionary and ambitious proposition that you can reach people everywhere with the same message, and they will be motivated to take action, whether they're in Burkina Faso, Brazil, Bahrain, or Britain. But it's working. I'm very happy to tell you that we have members in every single country of the world, and on many, many of the issues which we've been campaigning on, we get participation from every single country in the world. Of course, there are differences, and there are more members in some countries than in others, but the basic concept of Avaaz, that citizens everywhere can find their voice on compelling and vital global issues and sometimes national issues, has been proven to work. And so we're going to celebrate our 5 years by going far beyond what the goals which were set out in this already very ambitious plan. We've got more members, more impact, more funding. We're self-sustained in our funding. It's people like you who are providing all of the funding for Avaaz. We only get it from small donations from individuals. We don't have any corporate, government, foundation money at the moment. We are nimble. We're able to jump on emerging campaigns and issues very, very fast, within a matter of days or sometimes hours if necessary. And we're doing a whole range of things that sometimes surprise people when we tell them about it. So, to summarize what we do, and as many of you who raised your hands earlier know, we offer people the chance to sign on to petitions, and you can see several of them flashing on the screen behind me. And I'm not going to talk so much about the content of what we do and specific campaigns. Of course, I can take questions on why we did this or why we did that, or our views on one thing or another. But suffice it to say that we're a multi-issue. So the organisations, the main organisations which have been operating for a long time, such as Oxfam and Greenpeace, they're known for having a niche, a specialism, and for pursuing their campaigns in that area. And that's fantastic, and we work very closely with all of those organisations and many more. But what we do is offer people a chance to be involved on a whole range of issues, not just to say I'm an environmentalist, or I care about global governance, or I'm worried about the economy, but to be able to take part in actions across a range of those fronts. The main ways in which people do that is by signing petitions, and the other ways we also discussed messages, offline delivery, protests, etc. Now, how do we identify those petitions? I mean, there's a lot of problems in the world, a lot of things going on. Well, there are several ways, one of which is a massive correspondence which comes in from members who are spotting campaigns, they're involved with this, involved with that. They say, look, we're concerned about this. Can you look into it? We think it's right for Avaaz to be involved. You can help push this across the tipping point and get the favourable decision taken. So we get, I haven't got the latest figures, but tens of thousands of emails a month from our members with all sorts of suggestions. We also poll our members regularly, just small fractions of the membership. We poll them to see what is of interest. We get tons of approaches from campaigning organisations of all kinds, sometimes from officials, sometimes from whistleblowers in large companies or whoever, with tips about something which we might get involved with. If we think it's a possibility, we'll research it, we'll look into it, we'll call up various people who we think have the right expertise to triangulate, to cross-check what it is. And then we'll often, in a way that surprises a lot of people, go straight to drafting a possible campaign. We'll see, can we condense it to those few hundred words, the nub of the issue, make something which is compelling and exciting for people to respond to. If we're convinced enough about it in the team, and we have brutal processes of discussion and saying that doesn't make sense and that doesn't seem clear, if it passes that test, then we'll check with a proportion of our members if they think it also makes sense. We'll ask people to comment on the draft, or ask people to participate in the action. So after that second hurdle, we'll launch it out. And then we're always carefully watching the statistics of the campaign to see how many people are participating, how many people are interested out of our members. If people are very excited, we may send it a second time, or if we think we can get to a symbolic number, like 1 million people in favour of independence of Palestinian statehood, I should say, and they should take it to the United Nations. 2 weeks ago, we were in the throes of that campaign, and I'm sure many of you were participating. We were just close to 1 million, and it was about to be the decision moment, and we were about to have a big media splash on it. So we made sure we passed out the campaign to more members and got those members excited to spread the campaign to their friends and family. We got over 1 million. We did not only media launches of that, but opinion polls. We did a flotilla up the East River of small boats with banners saying 1 million people in favour of this. We got lots of the media, including the Arab media, which is crucial, and all excited about this, to be on another boat filming this and getting this very prominent. So we select a range of issues and we deliver them with the best splash that we can. We have built up this 10 million people by one simple route, by making our members, the people who receive our emails initially, excited enough about it that they will spread it. They will send it around, send the email on to their friends, relations, work colleagues, whoever. They will also post on Facebook, Twitter, and all those other means to share, as well as come together in the pub and maybe talk about the Avaaz campaign, which they just received. So this big build-up of membership has just been by that effect alone. And I think it's fantastic to know that you can get this kind of virtual citizen organising so dynamic in a period of less than 5 years that you can reach a number of close to 10 million. Now, there are many more examples I can tell you of what we've done, but I want to just show quickly a video which summarises part of the logic of Avaaz and was one of the ways in which we were wanting to get messages out into the world. And let's see what you think. I hope the audio is going to work. And let's try. This video, as you can see, has been seen by 2.5 million people. It won an award for YouTube Political Video of the Year a couple of years ago when it was put out there. And at that time, Avaaz's membership was much smaller. Let me see.
Islam and the West
have always been at war.
The same goes back to the Crusades.
Another world is possible, and we pledge to make it real.
there's several things that I can say about that, and I'd be interested in any of your comments as well. And you can see there's a whole bunch of other videos on the Avaaz YouTube channel. Not that we curate that quite as well as we could do on an ongoing basis, but there's still a bunch of stuff up there you may be interested to look at when you have time. So one of the things that motivates us at Avaaz is that there is a world which most people everywhere want, as a set of core values which are universal, and that very often our leaders let us down. They do not focus on those values, they do not focus on all of our long-term collective interests, but they use divide and rule methods, and they use other methods to make people think that this great world which we could get to is not possible. When we craft our campaigns, and I hope you think that when you receive them, we try and do so in a way that conveys hope, possibility, and opportunity. We don't just bemoan the world as it is, the decision that's likely to be taken, the problems that are going on. We try and build people, we will try and work together to think that things are possible and then make them possible in that way. And you saw there protests on the streets of Egypt and other countries in the Middle East and North Africa a few years ago. And it's certainly the case that very, very few pundits and commentators of any kind thought that democracy in Egypt, Tunisia, etc., Libya, would be possible in, the early part of this current decade. But people on the ground didn't take no for an answer. They stood up, they organised, using all sorts of different means. I love the story that when the mobile phone blockade and the internet blockade caught light in Egypt, the activists who were trying to organise a second Tahrir Square occupation demonstration, they decided to use taxi drivers as their means to spread the message. But rather than go to the taxi drivers union or directly ask taxi drivers to spread the notice that on a certain day at a certain time people would be occupying the square again, they got in a bunch of different taxis during the couple of days before and loudly, using stage whispers, said, well, we're going to have this thing and it's going to be there and then, and don't tell anyone about it, it's top secret, knowing that the taxi drivers would be earwigging. And then within a few hours the thing had spread all across town and the taxi drivers were passing on this supposedly confidential information to everyone else who sat in the back. So it takes many, many different means to spread citizens' messages, to organise, and what we're doing is just one way, but very often it can complement what a lot of other brave people are doing on the ground and enable people who aren't either able to or willing to take those more very frontline dramatic steps to play their part. So around the Middle Eastern uprisings, many of you have probably been involved in signing petitions, stand with the Egyptian people, and for the no-fly zone in Libya, where 1 million of our members were in touch with their UN delegations in March, saying that we cannot leave the people of Benghazi alone. There is this responsibility to protect under the UN, and we have to take that seriously and do something about it. And we think that intervention by Avaaz members all over the world was decisive in making some countries abstain and some countries support the motion, which has now led to Gaddafi being kicked out, and hopefully soon will lead to a democratic and prosperous Libya for all of them. Another thing that we've been doing in recent months is many of our members contributed to funding for what we called a Break the Blackout project. And this was after the mobile phone blackouts and the internet blackouts in several of those countries. It seemed clear that citizens, even with clever taxi driver techniques and other approaches, were struggling to spread from city to city the protests that they were doing, particularly struggling to get their messages to the outside world so that we could see them on our TVs and that our politicians would therefore be motivated to support. So members put in funding when we ran an appeal for this Break the Blackout project, and we said we would provide technology, training and support for citizen journalists to be able to record what was going on the streets of Dara, Damascus, Homs and other places so that they can show the world what is going on. And Syria is the place where this has worked particularly well. And we have provided kits which allow people to upload footage to satellites, and we then decode that, verify it, and get it out to the world's media. And a decent proportion of what you may see on the CNN, BBC, and elsewhere comes from citizen journalists who've been empowered by Avaaz members all over the world. And those people are risking their lives every day. They are doing phenomenal work on the ground. And the situation in Syria is grim. As you may have been following, the Security Council vote went totally against Syria this week because of Russia mainly and China also in the way. So there's a lot of work to be done. But that's an example of how Avaaz can support people's voices on the ground, or we have people all over the world supporting people on the front line to convey messages which come back then to people all over the world, which we hope eventually will create change and lead to a new regime in Syria. Now, I've already spoken for half an hour and spoken longer on some of the things I was going to say than others. I'm just going to back out and show, well, actually, I'm going to just show you a few other examples of Avaaz in action, just to stimulate your thinking. I think many of you see the website, see emails that we send, these terse messages about what's going on in the world. I've given you some of the thinking behind that and some of the processes which we go through. Less visible often are the delivery of the petitions, the delivery of the actions to politicians and other decision makers and to the media. And it's important, and it's one of the things that we do as compared to, we do better than some of the petition places where you can just go and register your own petition and then get it going, is that we put teams, give teams the challenge of taking this and really making sure that decision makers hear the voices and act on them. And we do that in a whole range of ways, and I'm just going to flash a few in front of you now, which may prompt some questions. And one thing I haven't talked about in detail, but I'm happy to, is the story of the Modoc Campaign, which we ran between the last election, the general election, to some extent, but particularly hard from last November until July, when Rupert Murdoch's News Corporation was forced to withdraw his Beast Card B bid in the face of massive political and public concern over the phone hacking incidents. But it was our members, all of us, who delayed the deal between March and July, and Jeremy Hunt, the minister responsible, said so, which meant that the deal was still live, hadn't been signed off by the time that the Murli Dowler outrages and the other outrages surfaced in July. So without us, Rupert Murdoch today would have control, we believe, of Beast B, but with us and the activism that we've all been part of, he has not, and he's absolutely on the back foot, I'm very glad to say. So I'll show you a few slides, technology permitting. Whoops, that wasn't the right thing to do. I'm not a Mac person. And here we go. Then I'd be happy to take any of your questions about any aspect of what we do. That's a field we built outside the European Commission building in Brussels. You won't be able to read the text, so I'll just say a few. A chalk artist did this incredible field that was on genetically modified food last December with a 1 million petition. This is on Burma, and we delivered to Downing Street with some Burmese monks. That was on the global food crisis in 2008 to the UN Secretary General. That was the now semi-disgraced, or largely disgraced, head of the IMF on what to do on the first round of the financial crisis 3 years ago. That was, I won't describe them all. This is in India, where we've been our members have been very effective in pushing for strong anti-corruption legislation, so-called Jan Lokpal Act, in recent weeks and months. This is to Bayer. This is at the annual general meeting of Bayer, a large pesticide company, where we're asking for them to ban neonicotinoid pesticides, which are associated with the bee die-offs, which many countries are experiencing at the moment. We did a stunt outside and then went inside, gave a speech and handed over the petition of 1.2 million people. This was, many of you may have participated, a global climate wake-up call before the Copenhagen climate talks, where many people phoned at the same time on the same day, their leaders, prime ministers, presidents, etc., urging a strong deal. This was against the Uganda, outrageous legislation in Uganda, which was to make homosexuality punishable by anything up to capital punishment. And that we've twice stalled and blocked through rapid response campaigns when it was coming into Parliament. That's a whole bunch of things. This was, in the run-up to Copenhagen, we did what we call climate action factories. We got a whole bunch of activists who weren't working directly for or with Avaaz to just do different stunts and different ways to capture the media and public attention in the run-up. So here we had people dressed up as aliens saying, "Take me to your climate leader," and crying out about the lack of climate leadership anywhere to be found. This is the climate wake-up call again, a bunch of people outside the House of Commons. This is citizens organising in Delhi for the anti-corruption, and again a big cake. This is Brazilian anti-corruption legislation. We plus a lot of Brazilian organisations, but with Avaaz surging on top of them, have got fantastic legislation in place in Brazil, which means that if a politician has been indicted for corruption, they cannot stand again at the next election, which is of course being fought tooth and nail. And it's funny that it's surprising to everyone that it got passed, because the very politicians who would be subject to the law, of course, have to pass it in the first place. So it was a massive battle, everyone phoning, protesting, using the media, using every kind of device, which got it through. And Brazil, I should say, is the country with our largest membership. I think it's about 1.2 million people now in Brazil are members of Avaaz. This is on swine flu outside the World Health Organization. Oh, this is one of the things we did on Rupert Murdoch. We did 3 Men in a Bed in London. In the building behind was a hotel where Jeremy Hunt, the minister, the chairperson of BSCIP, and some others were having a conference. And we did this on the morning in March this year of the announcement by Jeremy Hunt that he was minded to allow the bill through with a few tweaks, a few undertakings from News Corporation, which really wouldn't have made a whole lot of difference. And this got itself all over the 10 o'clock news, the newspapers, and everywhere, and helped feed the story that there was mass public opposition to the proposal. And I don't know if any of you saw in July, when the Modoc story was really all over the papers and the TV, there was a massive fiberglass head, a fiberglass Modoc head we produced, or we got some theatre producers or theatre people, creatives, to make very well and professionally, much better than we do the normal botch job. This bed was just cobbled together from bits and pieces in someone's basement. And we got that all over the media as a defining image of popular concern. And we had puppets. This big Modoc character had puppets of Jeremy Hunt and David Cameron, who he was manipulating. And this, we thought, distilled the essence of the problem of Rupert Murdoch in a way that sometimes 1,000 words cannot. So I think I'm going to leave it there and take any questions, comments, suggestions about where Avaaz should go next. We have lots of ideas, but we welcome many more. Please.
I was just wondering, are there sometimes issues that come up that are so urgent?
I don't want to speak loud because
are there sometimes issues that are so urgent to respond to that you don't have time to do the whole sort of consultation process, and you just have to make an executive decision as a team to do something like that?
So in case anyone couldn't hear, it's a question of whether we sometimes short-circuit some of those processes with members that I talked about in the beginning. And I don't think there are any examples where we just bash it out. And it's a very healthy thing for we who are lucky enough to be staff at Avaaz to know that everything gets tested with our members, and if it meets all of your levels of interest and excitement, then we run with it. But in the organisations where I've worked before, often you can think you've got the most fantastic idea and you can excite yourselves around the table where you're meeting and bash it out, but that never happens in Avaaz. It's always meeting the acid test of member uptake, which is great.
Yes, I'm just curious as to what kind of criteria you actually have when you have to select, knowing that you do the research thoroughly, but there obviously has to be a sort of framing for sort of judgments, and I just wondered. What you're doing there.
So that's the question about what criteria we use, how we frame the judgments for what to select. I mean, it's very hard. The main one is that we think we can collectively make a difference. It's not just going to be a bleat in the wilderness or a puff of smoke. It's going to be something where mass citizens' voices, citizens acting together, shouting together, will push decision makers to change their minds. So that's the main acid test. We've got even some jargon for that, but I won't worry you about that. In terms of the range of issues, we try and have a diversity, like I said. We try not to get, although this year or the last few months, we've been quite heavily stuck into the Middle East because the Arab Spring shows us so many opportunities there, and those may be rare, and if we don't help those people on the ground take them, they may not come again for a while. In the lead up to Copenhagen, we heavily focused on climate, and we will do again when we think the moment is right. We'll do some stuff up to the Durban summer, which is coming up, but particularly next year we think is a time when we could, the global community may be ready after Copenhagen to come back to it. So a lot of it is on the question of winnability, on the question of how we, plus all those organisations already working in this area, can together make a difference.
Can you say a little bit more about the testing with the members? Because how does that work? Do you just send out to a sort of particular gang of people or a section of the membership, or whatever? How does it work?
Yeah, so as I said, we've got polling going on, we've got testing going on. The testing itself can be done in different ways. Sometimes we put at the end of a poll, if we run a campaign this way, would you support it? If we run it this way, would you support it? This way, would you support it? Or if we run campaigns on issues X, Y, and Z, would you support it? And we can get a sense of people's excitement. But very often also we send, mostly we also send to a random sample of our members the campaign as live and see whether they click and go with it. And then as the campaign is going out in different languages, we keep an eye on those statistics, and sometimes we can throttle back, or sometimes we can put more resources into those campaigns if it's really flying, it's getting very viral. At the moment we've got a campaign which is going crazy in Italy because Berlusconi is trying to gag the media on reporting on some of his many misdemeanors. And Italians are going absolutely crazy about this campaign, and so we're putting extra resources into it right now. So a bunch of other hands. Please, do you want to moderate this, Grace, or I'll just go with it? I saw the lady there.
I just wondered, a lot of what you're talking about is your kind of individual campaigns, but earlier on you were saying that you also collaborate with larger organisations such as Friends of the Earth. I wondered if you could expand on that.
Yeah, so the field that we built, or an artist made for us outside the European Commission Bellarmine building in Brussels, was a joint campaign with Greenpeace. And so we jointly collected signatures calling on the from all over Europe, or the EU to be precise, calling on the European Commission to do further studies on GMO before it liberalised who could plant which genetically modified crops where. And we thought if we work together with Greenpeace, we can get over 1 million. And the 1 million is a threshold for the European Commission to respond. And they formally committed under the Lisbon Treaty that if they get 1 million signatures from every country in the EU, with a certain number from each EU country, they have to make a legislative proposal on the back of that. Now, Greenpeace is a well-established, very strong organisation, but there are some gaps, and they know that we have presence in some of the EU countries where they struggle to mobilise. We also don't know nearly as much about GMOs as Greenpeace, and so working together, we were able to get the number, and we were able to bring our outreach, some of our creative ideas, their issue knowledge and their advocacy follow-through capability in Brussels, and it worked well. And neither side could have done that thing in the way that we did and the speed we did separately. There are many other examples. So we're working with Syrian human rights organisations every day to get out reports on what's happening on the ground and brief the media. We're working with many organisations who specialise around the UN when it comes to Palestinian statehood. there are a whole range of partnerships. But I think one thing to note is that we don't normally lock into formal coalitions or formal arrangements on an ongoing basis, because we find that we couldn't do that across all of the issues that we're working on in all of the countries and all of the fora like the EU and the UN. So we work together when Avaaz has got something particular to bring, and then we just keep in touch, and then we work together again when the moment is right. So that's a basic summary. I see the guy here at the table.
Sorry, just to clarify that. So, before I ask the question, are you saying that the European Union is obliged, if there is 1 million in one country of the EU, to then work on a legislative proposal with regard to what's being demanded, or does there have to be 1 million in every country within the European Union?
It has to be 1 million, but with a threshold of people from all the 27 member states. It's a so-called European Citizens Initiative, and it's not completely in place yet, but we were not waiting for them to put all of the framework in place. It's agreed under the treaty, and so we said, right, here we are, we're going to be the first, and we're going to then push you to follow through. In the UK, there's also another thing. There's a common, what's called an e-petitions initiative, where if you get 100,000 British citizens to sign a petition on the government's official website, which they've set up for this, then it has to lead to a parliamentary debate. There's some wiggle room for them to get out of it, but broadly speaking, that is the
Which
case.
has reduced petrol prices at the moment.
So you may not agree, well, many of us in this room may not agree with some of the petitions which are most popular, as my friend here is reminding.
What is that threshold in the European Union and the other countries? Do you know what that is?
I can't remember the details of it now. I'm going to say it's 2,000 in each of the other countries, or 5,000, I can't
So
remember.
my question was with regard to, if you're talking about issues, so would the Would the Sudanese government's attacks on the Nuba people, would that be something to produce a petition, or the goings on in Burma with regard to continual repression of people, Tibet, these are the kind of things? Do they have to be very, very large in particular countries, or do they have to be sometimes worldwide, such as the second generation antiretrovirals, pushing drug companies to allowing those to be used without patent? What sort of things?
Well, all those three issues we have campaigned on. Well, the third one, the new antiretrovirals, we're in close touch with some people who hope that Avaaz can play a part in getting a good decision from the US, a good signal from the US, and then to cascade that through to a summit meeting, which you probably know more than I do, next June, where there's meant to be pledging of new money behind those new antiretrovirals. And on Burma and Sudan, we have had campaigns in recent months, and we welcomed the new South Sudan, but with obviously some caution about the border issues and other issues. And we hope to do more, but it's hard for us to find, which means our members acting together can really influence what the Northern Sudanese do. So if you or others have great ideas about how Avaaz can make a difference there, then we're very, very keen to hear them.
Sort of
But probably we haven't got a chance now to go into
I
that.
understand that. How small, I mean, it's not small in regard to, it's on the news that an Iranian woman is going to be stoned to death. How do you feel that you can't involve yourself in individual persons being threatened with death, or
No,
can
but
you think
that's an example. So if the Nuba people are, hundreds of them or thousands of them are at risk, then that's something we can clearly work on. But there was the case you're referring to of Sakineh Ashtiani in Iran, who was due to be stoned to death on after a very, very dubious court case. And most people thought that was totally impossible to work on. Why would the Iranians care about petitions, about people sending messages? They brush off what the US government and pretty much everybody else has to say. Why would they worry about that? So we didn't take no for an answer. And we worked hard both with sort of typical outcries, but then with much more targeted, following through with very precise and targeted interventions, by which I mean Iran cares about Turkey and Brazil. Those are the only two countries where they have very good relations, trading relationships and other relationships. So what we did is we got our members in Turkey and our members in Brazil to do specific things, to call through, to use the media, etc. And we managed to get the leaders of both of those countries to be in touch with Ahmadinejad in Tehran and say, look, and publicly do so, not just behind the scenes. Say, look, this issue of this woman who's about to be stoned on framed charges is causing big concern in my country, so please back off or this is going to jeopardize our relationships. And that worked. And that was a tough process we had in the team to think and reach out to all sorts of experts and allies. What would it be that could affect the outcome? And it has, and so far, touch wood, and we're keeping an eye on it. She is still alive, and let's hope that one day she can be freed and exonerated. I see a lady at the back there.
Yeah, I was wondering how you did the initial marketing for the organization, how you got from 10 members to 100,000, and how you got out to every country in the world.
Well, I wasn't there at the time, but it's basically this mechanism of virality, or people spreading to their friends, and of course people have friends and colleagues across borders, and then also getting into the media and working on issues which people in those different countries and constituencies care about. But there was an absolute, very occasionally we do some Facebook advertising or something like that, but it's basically through the spread effect across different countries. And there was a little bit of cooperation with some other organisations on the ground in those countries who helped us send one mail shot to some of their members to see if those people would be interested also to join Avaaz. So that's the basics of it, but I wasn't there at the time to be able to tell you the full details.
It was just a question about what are your demographic of people who take action against P, and do you have people taking action in China?
China is an interesting exception because we are broadly centred there, and it's some of us pages occasionally are visible there and others aren't. We have some people, we have a bunch of people in Hong Kong who participate in our actions, but very few on mainland China, unfortunately. What was the first part of your question?
But what's the demographic generally, not the Chinese, obviously?
The demographic is very broad. We find that out from polling, and it's a whole wide range of ages, occupations, people of different social classes, etc. It's very, very broad, and that's fantastic as well. So it means that we aren't seen as just one bunch of people or another bunch of people. We're seen as, often by politicians and others, as if this is of concern across the Avaaz community, then it's likely to be something which they should worry about. Yeah.
I'd like to ask you, I suppose we can put it in terms of democracy. I was very struck in one of the clips in your video. There was the phrase, another world is possible. Of course, I'd heard that from the very beginning of the anti-capitalist movement in Seattle through January. And that brings me on to a question, really a general question about the politics of democracy. How do you, your organisation, there could be many, many petitions or many, many online hits coming from organisations that generally the liberal left, the anti-capitalist movement would find out of order, BNP, whatever. How does the democratic mechanism work in your, I've been very moved by this incredible organisation. How do you say you're out of order, and how do you say, I know you is not individual, how is the democratic mechanism for choosing who you will get engaged with?
Well, I mean, it's you can see a bunch of description further on the website, probably phrased better than I'm going to do it now. But we're committed to human rights. We're committed to transparency, full spectrum democracy, not just elections, to exercise their rights every day, where people are thinking long term. And there are a bunch of organisations. I mean, obviously the BNP is a classic example, who we just wouldn't.
I'm wondering, as a team, how you get paid. I'm assuming that you're not all full-time volunteers. So I'm wondering how you go about that and how you continue to be sustainable.
Well, we get paid, as I say, by these micro donations from people all over the world. There's a cap of $5,000 per donation, so that means that no one can be, we don't have to spend time doing funding proposals and all that jazz, which I've done in other places. We don't also have to say what we're going to do in month 17 and month 23. I don't know if you've done any of those kind of proposals for different organisations where you tie your hands and make it hard because you don't know what's going to be happening in month 17. So we get paid. I mean, we get paid salaries, and we have enough regular money coming in that we know, unless until we mess up and do something wrong, that members are going to stay with us and keep making regular donations. So we have a bunch of people who we call sustainers who are giving direct debits or regular monthly contributions, and then others who are giving on the back of campaigns that they like. Sometimes after signing a campaign it'll say, if you like this campaign, do you want to contribute to the organisation? And then we do one-off fundraisers, such as the one relating to Syrian technology we can give to citizen journalists in Syria, and it's working. And so we can get paid, we can run these things and continue to expand.
So just on the back of that then, who kind of keeps check and balances to ensure that your pay is kind of what it should be and that no one's being paid above the average? Is there a way of making sure that...
Well, we publish financial materials and people can scrutinise it. But I'm sure you and others, everyone can also have different views on it, but we publish a bunch of information and we have a board which can look at that. I think you wanted to say something here?
Yeah, I was just wondering, going back to, you obviously raising awareness about it, but do you actively get involved in, like if you make a big awareness about a certain subject, can you raise funds for it if it's needed, or do you then pass that on to specific charities, or do you bring a lot of people in? Is it just like an awareness thing, or do you get more involved afterwards?
Some of the money that we raise would go straight to organisations on the ground in Haiti or in Burma. We don't spend it, we just, our members contribute and we find the best organisations in Pakistan, Haiti, Burma. These are examples on the humanitarian side, but also sometimes on the side of being able to, we got some material to Burmese also to break the kind of blackout there of communications. So we do pass through funding to different groups on the ground, and sometimes we spend it ourselves directly. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yes, this is an issue that's been covered partly by some of the answers, but this is about focus. When Modoc case, as soon as he dropped the ambitions for Sky, then does the focus then change to something else, or because he said in front of the parliamentary committee that the news of the world was only a small part of his business, and he's still in the world, and he's still very powerful in the world. So what happens about the change of focus?
So that's the question of how much we follow through. Once Modoc dropped his B-Sky B bid, do we shift to other things? And the answer is yes and no. So a lot of my work in the summer months was entirely focused on Modoc, and I was glad to be able to draw breath and work on some of these other important topics. But we did a fundraiser and our members supported the idea of taking the campaign global. We'd had some effect here. Let's take it particularly to the US and Australia, also to the Middle East where he wants to buy into a big news network. And so we've now got people, project team who's working on that, and we've already got a public inquiry in place in Australia through some campaigning we've done, and we're looking for ways to tackle Fox News and some of the other stuff which Rupert Murdoch is doing over there. And here we've downscaled, but we've not switched off. So we've got a petition going talking about a 20% limit on media ownership. And as the Leveson inquiry heats up, or the decisions come towards a new Communications Act, we'll be vigilant and see how we can influence the whole media landscape and the media rules for the foreseeable future to prevent it happening again.
I had a question about your long-term relationship with decision makers and influencers.
Can you speak up how much of everyone?
So EU politicians, the UN and so on. I mean, kind of traditional campaigning organisations often mount public campaigns where there's kind of collective action, petitions and other actions on as one strand of their activity, and also maintain a kind of behind-the-scenes lobbying function as well. I mean, do you do any behind-the-scenes work with influencers, or is the kind of focus of what you do on these very dramatic, kind of large-scale public actions? And the follow-up bit was just you clearly have to be taken very seriously by influencers, but is there ever a sense in which they feel publicly ambushed by what you do, and if so, what are the consequences of that?
So on the first point, do we play the inside game as well? Do we do advocacy, or do we just do this public mobilisation and actions in the street? We do a bit of both, but for sure our strength is the public stuff, the working through the media, doing something visual and big with a large number on it. And our follow through, we do advocacy as well. So around the Palestinian issue, we've done a bunch of advocacy. Around the Syrian issue, although that hasn't gone well at the moment, doing a bunch of advocacy. We've supported Syrians to go to Moscow, to go to Brazil and elsewhere to try and get those countries warmed up for a Security Council, a positive vote. We do a bunch of advocacy in the UK, around the tar sands issue, or around the tar sands European issue, which is coming up very soon, or at the EU level. But we're discussing at the moment, now we're reaching a new stage of the organisation, and would you believe it, we're trying to do a 20-year plan to follow up on this 5-year one, which we're nearly coming to the end of. We're just discussing whether we should be investing more heavily in that type of advocacy, or whether we should be, as we're doing now, relying on working with other organisations who are really there on an ongoing basis, man-marking, if you like, those decision makers. And we can empower them if they say, right, in the last week 500,000 people have expressed this, and they can tell us that if we just get phone-ins to the German finance minister, we may get a better resolution for Greece. That's sort of how we're doing it at the moment, division of labour, and a little bit of advocacy by ourselves, but we may change the mix. So if you have thoughts about that, then please let us know. I think you had another question, but it's escaped me.
Oh, it was just about whether politicians actually ever feel ambushed by what you do, and if so, are there consequences to that relationship?
They do, but Jeremy Hunt wasn't too enamoured of what we were doing several times, and we even went to ambush him in Godalming at the Sainsbury's, where he was doing a surgery for his constituency members. So we went off down to Godalming. We got a bunch of our members from close to Godalming who we could send a specific email to, because most of our members tell us their postcodes. And so then throughout the morning before his surgery, during it and afterwards, we were a presence of people outside with No B Sky B, hacked off with Modoc and whatever other signs. And so he had to say hello to us on the way in. He saw we were still there on the way out, and he stood there then for a 15-minute meeting, which was the only meeting I've had with Rupert Murdoch, despite the months of campaigning and helping bring masses of citizens' voices to bear. But we had to ambush him, otherwise he wouldn't have listened. And he said, I'm worried that lawyers are going to sue the pants off me if I make the wrong decision. And we said, you're right, mate. Absolutely. We're preparing lawyers right now. We're going to go with a judicial review. If there are any of the 40,000 submissions which our members made to your consultation, which you overlook and do not take seriously, that could be grounds for judicial review, which then sent him into panic mode, and he had to get people to crawl over all of our submissions more and more, which is what led to the delay, which what led to the bid then being called off. So sometimes ambushing is what we need to do. I think I'll end it there. Is that good?